Hi, everybody, welcome. My name is Casey Bloom. I am a senior account manager with ASG, and I will be your moderator today. The topic of our panel is From Onsite to Everywhere, how production teams are being rebuilt. And joining us in this conversation, we have Matt Silverman, a chief creative officer with I Believe in Swordfish, John Smart, an account executive also with ASG, Jim Vestola, an AV and event production manager at Robinhood, and then Brandon Whitaker, who is an AV experience manager over at Snap. And so we're talking today about the nature of production teams and how historically they've been tied to a physical space, right? We have teams that are successfully executing events and live productions in a studio or a venue or a control room. And I think what we've found over the last couple of years is distributed teams and automated workflows are shifting that narrative, and it's not quite such a black and white line. And so I want to preface this conversation today by saying that we're not looking to say one is better than the other, right? We're not trying to convince anybody automated is better than human or distributed works better than on-site. I think our intention today is to hear from leaders across production and to understand how they make the decisions, how they determine what the best fit is for any current situation, and then also share some of the learnings that they've seen along the way. And so the first topic I'm going to raise is having a distributed team. And so I'm going to go over to Jim. Jim, you have built many teams in live production. And I'm curious for you how the way you are building a team is different today than even 2 or 3 years ago.
Thanks. So, so it used to be that when you were building a team, you wanted to build, the best audio guy and the best lighting person and the best TD and whatnot, and you didn't mind if they were closed-minded in their technology and they only knew one stream of technology. You can't do that anymore, right? Your AV folks need to also be IT folks, need to also be broadcast folks. So one day you might have somebody sitting operating a camera, whereas the next day they're operating a switcher, or maybe they're operating switchers and cameras these days. The days of specialists are kind of gone, at least in the corporate world. And you also need to be able to operate, a Zoom console and an NDI router and, any one of a myriad of things that just weren't asked of an event team 5 years ago.
So, Brandon, I know you have a distributed team currently, but also people at Snap are physically present and tied to venues. You have some really great venues in Blue House in LA and Bloom in London. Your team members are required to be successful in those physical spaces, but also to collaborate with a distributed team internationally. And so what are you finding are skill sets that rise to the surface as really valuable in teams that are required to work like that?
Yes. In addition to what Jim mentioned about being this versatile, I think a couple of things that stand out are being able to self-manage. So if you find yourself in a tough spot and your leadership is in a different time zone, you have to be able to get the context and have the confidence to make a call and not wait on direction. And then another thing that comes to mind is what I'll call a signal to noise discipline. So being able to have really concise and clear communication. You just need to be very explicit in a lot of these situations globally, even on site of what you need, what you've done, and what you're waiting on are really important.
And I think I want to toss a follow-up at you, which is I know that team culture is really important to Snap, but also to you personally as a leader. And so I'm curious as to where does culture fit rank in terms of when you're evaluating skill sets on your team?
Yeah, I mean, team culture is kind of everything, right? So building a real ethos of what's the buzzword that I'm looking for here that isn't actually a buzzword? It's the emotional safe space to make mistakes and grow from those mistakes. So really, giving people the opportunity to explore their environment, refine their instincts, and really, learn having a strong team culture.
That is a really valuable perspective in terms of the idea of a safe space, because I think when we're talking about anything live or live production, live events, the stakes are high. There's typically high pressure, high stakes, and so creating a space for team members to learn from failure, I think, is really important. And so, Matt, I'm going to shift. You are our creative voice on this panel, and so I'm curious how having a distributed team has changed in the creative space.
Yeah, so I don't do live event work on site. We create content for live events. So my studio, I believe in Swordfish, we focus on motion design for marketing and UX projects. So, you know, in the olden days, we might have been considered a post-production studio, but there's no post to it. We're creating everything from concept to completion. Prior to COVID, we were here in the Bay Area. We mostly work with tech companies on a lot of very confidential projects. So we had a lot of demanding requirements before COVID. You know, black project rooms, lockdown, no windows. You know, everybody's suffocating with no ventilation. Seriously, ice buckets, the coolest. But when COVID hit, it was like, do whatever you can to get the work done. All those protocols went away. And we were suddenly able to open up our workforce to top talent from around the world. So we would get a job, load up 20 freelancers, and everywhere, Taiwan, Germany, it didn't matter. Our workforce widely opened, and after COVID, we continued it. And during COVID, 2 of my employees, you know, one of them moved to Idaho. I hired another kid in Idaho, so I have an office now, technically in Idaho, out of their houses. We still have an office in San Rafael, but and we kind of keep things working the same way that we used to, where all of our files, all of our work still live in the studio on the studio server on the NAS. We have a true NAS, you know, 750 terabyte, 100 gigabit NAS. Everybody's working on that, but everybody's at home. So everybody's remoting into the office through Apple Remote Desktop or TeamViewer. So they're using a remote desktop application, but all the files stay in our server locked in a secure room that the clients still approve the security level of. They're just using their monitor and keyboard as a dumb terminal. So, you know, and this is how we're going to keep going. I don't make anybody go to the office. We usually have about 2 people in there a day, 2 or 3 people. I'll go in once a week. And we just need to make sure it doesn't melt down. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on this side of things.
I think a recurring theme across everything is making sure it doesn't melt down. So John, you are a different perspective here in the sense that you advise clients on technology and the design and build of the spaces, and taking into consideration what you've heard Jim and Brandon and John share. How are you seeing that change reflected in what companies are investing in and how they are designing spaces?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you move from physical boxes in a physical event space and everything is on site, everyone's together, and you start distributing that, you know, you're distributing your workforce, you're distributing technology, some of your equipment might be living in the cloud, and you have these new workflows that everyone has to adjust to. And so some things remain the same. You know, your audio engineer is still pushing faders, your director is still cutting camera shots, and that aspect of the show remains unchanged. But when it comes to like troubleshooting, for example, there's a different set of problems that there's a learning curve there. And so sometimes, you know, you get a team together of very talented people who have been in this industry for decades, and, you know, you've hired the best talent that Jim was talking about, and you've put the culture together, you have the right personalities that really fit with this workflow, but suddenly you find them troubleshooting issues where, like, I don't know what's going on with this switcher because this is a problem I have never seen before. Typically, if I saw this on site, I might be thinking it's problem, you know, check this cable or check this, you know, scan converter or whatever it is. And now that you've virtualized some of that equipment, there's a whole new set of issues that you have to learn. And so I think, you know, making it safe, like providing a safe space for your crew to be beginners with new technology is so critical, and learning these new systems and what some of the gotchas are and how different the experience is with a distributed workforce. You know, that takes a little bit of time. And yeah, so I think one of the trickier parts with that too is educating your presenters on what's going to be different now. Like now you might have a director that's in a different state, fine. You know, the presenter on stage never saw the director in the first place. That doesn't really affect them a whole lot, you know, but for the crew, it's like everything is so radically different to us and our workflows. So figuring out how you educate and prepare your talent to the things that do affect them versus the thing that's noise for a presenter who's trying to think about their presentation. They don't really need to know about the different technology that has changed so radically. So it just takes time for the crew to adjust to the changes of the new workflows. Yeah.
And if I can interject on the troubleshooting bit, it sounds really basic, but it used to be troubleshooting was, okay, signal's hitting this box, it's not hitting this box. Okay, there's the problem. Now it couldn't be further from nonlinear. And to find a crew that can quickly, collectively, across states, across the country, collectively, if they're in the right culture, and the right mindset, can figure out, oh, actually the problem is in Denver with the audio server. Okay, great. How do we get around that, right? So different from the EIC being in the rack room. I'm going to reboot rack 2, we'll fix it. And 3 minutes later, it was fixed. So totally different mindset for everybody.
So I think what is an interesting theme that we're seeing across this panel already is the concept of giving people space to fail, giving people space to learn, and the importance of your workspaces being successful producing houses or executing successful live events, but also being spaces where people can learn and grow and better understand the things that are changing. John, you mentioned a couple of gaps in taking that transition from technology and the concept of what this can do to having it actually work in place. And I'm curious, across leadership, what are the things that you implement? And I think, Jim, I'm going to pick on you for this first. What are things as a leader that you put into place, or how do you get ahead of those gaps?
Is that for me? Oh, sorry.
Specifically, but to anybody.
So I think, boy, that comes down to training and repetition and mock events, and in tech rehearsals, talking about what your failover is for X, Y, and Z, and having the operations crew involved in the design discussion, and all of those, making all of those connections, because all this stuff is changing so fast, right? I mean, we haven't said the words AI here yet. We will at some point, right? That changes things.
We'll get there.
Right? Exactly. So it's so much more about a collective than getting back to the original question, than it was, well, go talk to the director, find out what kind of cameras he likes. Right? It's not that anymore. It's much more a collective across the crew and across the team.
And so we absolutely will be getting into the AI conversation. Don't you worry. But I think what, shifting the conversation into, we've talked about the skill sets of our workforce that are required when we're looking at a distributed team. As leaders, it also requires that you adjust and evolve. And so, Brandon, I know that you oversee a team internationally. And so what are some things that you do in your leadership style? What are some skills that you've had to adapt and learn to build trust when your team is they're not physically present where you are, but they're also maybe not even on the same continent?
Yes. Yeah, working with the global team, it really forces you to be like hyper intentional. So whether you're setting priorities or setting expectations or giving feedback, like you can't rely on the proximity effect. So you really need to make the most of all these interactions. And then, you don't want to overcorrect or like over-index or try to micromanage these situations too. So like, I think we keep coming back to this like psychological safety piece, but like really, yeah, trusting your team, giving them the proper context to feel confident in their roles, and yeah.
So, Matt, from the creative perspective, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what are some ways that your leadership has shifted when you are moving into a distributed model? And also, how do you navigate trust in the creative process?
Yeah, so all of my team, my staff, full-time staff, majority is working remote, and we communicate on Slack, and we use Slack huddles a lot, And I find it to actually be a more interactive, better way to work as a creative director. Because in the past, when we were on the studio, I would have a producer grab me and say, "Hey, this artist has their shot ready. Go and look at it. It's time. They need to go over there and give them critique it." I had no time to digest it. I'm being dragged over there, and I'm trying to find something to critique. And this happens all the time with our clients. I know it. The creative director at the big tech company has 2 minutes to look at something, and they're like, "It's your job to critique it," and he just throws out some random comment that is really not accurate. So by using Slack, we automated our system so that as soon as a render is complete on our render farm, we use Pixar's tractor render queue. We have Python hooked into Slack. As soon as a render is done, I'm notified. So I get a notification. I click a link. I get right to the artist's work. I check their work out. And then I could sit and think about it for a while. I'm not being it's not reactive. I could digest it and then give them honest feedback through Slack. If they have a question, we jump into a huddle. We also have weekly tech meetings that we call the lab with our team. So we have it in our calendar. If you're not available, if you're busy, you don't come. But we all gather. We talk about the latest in technology. We share what we think is cool. We do tests with current technology in that lab to try to push things forward. So the remote working, to me, is the smartest thing we've ever done. We used to have artists living in Pleasant Hill, and they would have to go to Cupertino to work on site at the client every day. And you're talking, it could be a 2.5, 3 hour bus ride to Cupertino and a 2 or 3 hour bus ride back. And they can't work on the bus. You can't be doing confidential stuff on the bus. So how is that productive? And to be a creative, you need solid blocks of creative time, uninterrupted. So now we have that. And in my business, it really comes down to, did you get your work done? I don't care when you do it. If you want to be on a schedule from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m., fine, as long as you get your shots done and you show up at the meetings. So this is a great world we're in now, I believe, for what we're doing creatively.
I think that's really great insight into the role that trust and accountability plays on your team, and the fact that you don't need someone to punch in and punch out and look at them physically working. They get it done, they get it done. And I think that's a valuable skill set. And you touched on a lovely segue into our next topic, which is AI and automation in the workplace, in workflows. And I think we're at an interesting moment in this conversation, in that we're now a few years in, right? We've heard for a couple of years these conceptual or theoretical conversations about how automation can potentially help our teams. And I think there's no question that people are aware of the benefits, but bridging that gap from it being something that we understand and we see the value in, to it actually being up and running and a successful, efficient part of our workday is a difficult leap. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And so, Matt, I'm going to take it back to you. Can you share about how, more specifically, you are implementing automation and the benefits that you are seeing across your team?
As a creative studio, we've been aware of AI for a long time. And actually, I really wanted to watch Rob Legato's talk right now, because he gave me an idea of a machine language or an ML product that I pitched to Sony 10 years ago. So it's been on my mind, but I never really understood how it would truly impact us. And about 3 years ago, we started using Gen AI in our work for conceptual design, mood boards, coming up with ideas, using ChatGPT to brainstorm. A year later, we were using it to create final shots. And now we're using it to create complete videos that I will honestly say are as good as better than if we shot it live action. The AI actors that we can generate now, consistent actors across shots with lip sync, perform better than any actor I could find here in the Bay Area. I'll tell you that right now. Non-SAG actors can't act. They can't even stand in line and pretend to be waiting for coffee without overacting. So I truly believe that AI right now is the worst we're ever going to see it in terms of the Gen AI, and we're using it. We're using it on full videos for publicly traded corporate clients. And now we're looking at how can we use all the other stuff. So we came at it from a creative side. Now we're looking at it from a utilitarian side. So every time that I need to find something in my company's wiki I never know how to find the wiki, and I'm thinking like, why do I need a wiki? We should just change this into a chatbot. So any freelancer could just get onto the chatbot, chat with it, get the information they need. We're vibe coding. We build a lot of software internally for our own internal production. It's all built in C++, Objective-C, Python. We're going in now in ChatGPT and actually making software. And now with Claude code, it's like you can make real software. So everything's changing fast. I don't know where it's going. I'm the guy who, before the world of AI, I would tell you where everything is going. I know exactly where everything's going. I have no clue.
So from a layperson perspective, if I'm sitting here and I'm hearing you say that, what is a realistic picture of the investment that I need to make? Is it in terms of time, in terms of workflow? What does it actually look like in terms of commitment on technology or financial to build something like that?
I'll just say real quick. I'll let these guys talk more. But what I've learned is that everything that I do in AI leads to other ideas of other things that I could do in AI. So if you're not using it for little things, you're missing out. It's like every time that I use it raises another idea. It might be the next day, it might be a week. And things like, if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said, I'm safe, I'm a creative director. I've since had chats with ChatGPT where it's given me every idea that I've proposed to my artist and 10 more that are better. So like, I'm not safe, nobody's safe, nobody knows where this is going. All of you are unsafe. The reality, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's going to change everything. And that's why I'm looking at where am I going in the future. But right now, there's a window of opportunity to take advantage of it. So we've got a 2 to 3 year window, I believe. But that time frame could change any minute.
It's an interesting perspective to see how this fits into the creative lens. I think there is a juxtaposition when you're looking at automation in live spaces and live events, because the reality is at their nature, events are unpredictable. There is that human element. It's a guarantee something is going to go sideways. I think anybody in events can rattle off a whole roster of stories of the time things went sideways and the crazy things you had to do to keep the lights on. And so from Jim and Brandon and John, looking at your production teams, how do you weigh the risk of automation, something that can feel really rigid, against the nature of events, which is inherently unpredictable?
I'll go. So I think, AI is such a catch-all for so many different functions. When I think of AI in terms of technology in a live event, I'm usually thinking of it as a multiplier in terms of how can you make one operator do more. I think a lot of people, especially those higher up that are signing the checks and looking at budgets, are thinking of AI as how can I remove a crew position. And I think a lot of times, like when you're talking about risk, that's where the real risk comes from. If you can say automate, and camera tracking is a great example because AI-driven camera tracking has come, like it's amazing when I look at, you program what presenter the camera's gonna follow and it does as good a job. It looks real and my eyes can't tell the difference between a real camera operator, operating the RoboCam joysticks versus the camera just doing itself with AI tracking. That's really cool. And from a budgetary perspective, great, why do I need a camera operator? From a risk perspective, especially when you're talking about tech and Silicon Valley, you're not just, maybe 90% of what you're shooting is presenters. So you'll plug in the presenter that the camera is supposed to track. Great, it's going to do an awesome job about that. But what about when they bring in like the robo dog that the camera needs to track and you're doing something weird, or like the person's going to pull out their phone and you need to zoom right in on the phone? When you have automated the human out of that, the automation knows how to follow the person and suddenly you're stuck. And it's kind of like, the self-driving car that you suddenly have to take the wheel and drive. And if you weren't prepared for that because you removed your crew position from the crew, suddenly the automation, it's no longer a multiplier. That becomes the corner that you've painted yourself into. So I think when you're automating, automate with intent and always think about like, what is the opportunity we're chasing? What is the problem we're solving for? And if I automate this, am I actually satisfying those two requirements? And then, great, AI-driven automation can be a multiplier where take that camera tracking, for example, and I'll land my plane real quick. A single tech operator in a breakout room, for example, oftentimes they have one hand on the audio console and one hand sort of switching cameras, and the camera shots tend to be not so great because you only have two hands. You can't go over and be operating the camera at the same time. So AI-driven camera tracking can multiply that operator and make the show look so much better. So there's the opportunity you're chasing is you're taking one operator and multiplying what they could be doing. So it just depends on, automate with intent is what I would say.
Jim, is this your experience on your production teams as well?
Yeah, I think it's automate with intent, and it's automate in low risk applications, but it's AI and automation as a tool, not necessarily as a be all end all in terms of production. One of the things we're working on is, it sounds simple, is an AI clip creator. Right? There's been various versions of this out in the world, but we get, and my chief engineer back there, Yavik, gets, hey, can you pull the clip when so-and-so says this to so-and-so says that? And it takes up an hour of his time to pull this 90-second clip. And we're working on AI that literally the Slack chat goes right to the process, and it pulls the clip out and processes and sends it back to the user, which frees up, I forget the number we came up with. It was like, if we can do this, it's going to free up like 40 hours a month of engineering time. That 40 hours a month of full-time engineering time is way more valuable to me than anything else.
Yeah, I get a little jealous hearing about Matt's creative journey because, in the live event world, it's like the deliverables are so real time. You don't really have a chance to re-render. So it is so important to manage that risk. There's cool tools you can, use for like being able to just render out a new voice of God, like voiceover, right? Like on the spot if, something changes in scheduling, or you got a new presenter, or doing like AI captioning into like multiple languages live is great. But yeah, there's just some areas where you kind of want a human at the helm and the risk isn't worth the reward. But yeah, back of house and this in day-to-day prep and admin, like it's amazing. So I'm actually excited for more opportunities for it to make sense to use it like in the real world, like live application.
I'd like to touch on that point. The two things that have excited me the most over the last couple of years have been Gen AI and our work that we've been doing with game engines. So we've been really taking advantage of Unreal Engine for large format work. So for example, we've been working on 9K LED ceilings for cruise ships. That the first ship we did, it took us 46 years to render the content. If we did it on one computer, it would have taken 46 years. Instead, we gave 11 years of that to the 100 NVIDIA GPUs in our office, and the remaining 14 years were done in the cloud with cloud rendering, which cost over $350,000. And when you're doing those cloud render shots, we would send one up to the cloud, spend $20,000, and then find an error and have to redo it. The last ship we did, we turned to the Unreal Engine and we ran all of our shots, we assembled them in Unreal Engine, and we turned those renders from a $20,000 render to getting done on one PC in our office in 3 hours. If we need to re-render it, 3 hours later, we got another one. So there are, we're utilizing new tech like AI, but we're using AI to create the concept art for those ceilings. And then we're using the Unreal Engine to just streamline and take these rendering times down to nothing. And we've been recently talking to the broadcast networks. They have their upfronts, and Bob Iger changes the Disney content at the last minute, and they can't re-render it. We can now re-render stuff very high resolution because of working with Unreal Engine. So just times are changing.
It's interesting to see the differences in how it is something that elevates the team versus expands the volume of work that you can do when you're talking about automation. And in our last couple of minutes, I want to kind of go through the panel and get an understanding of, for you, outside of technology on your teams, when you're looking at leadership, when you're looking at distributed teams, when you're looking towards the future, what do you think is more important than technology when you are building a sustainable team for the future?
People are everything to me. Technology changes, and I just want passionate, smart people who I like to be around. I learned a long time ago a saying that I live by, which is hire slow, fire fast.
And I would say always lead with customer. Like the customer is the reason we're here in the first place. The event doesn't exist for any reason other than, the person who actually like your customer. That's why we're all here in the first place. That's the meaning of life. Why we're all here. What we're all doing. So whatever if you're making a distributed workflow, if you're implementing a new technology, always make sure that it's in service of the customer's creative vision, and let the technology help you fulfill that goal better.
Yeah, and I think my interpretation of that same thing for our application is it's all about the team, right? Anybody can buy hardware and install it and make it work. But if your team, the technicians, and I'm looking around the room because a lot of my team is here, if they're not on point, then you got nothing. And as technology changes and improves and grows, the thing that I like to tell everybody is we are all here to help people communicate, period. And the technology doesn't matter, the transmission bit rate doesn't matter. What matters is we're here to help people communicate, and whatever it takes to make that happen, that's where our value is.
Yeah, I think it's great to be excited and like super bullish on all this technology and be aware of everything and be experimenting with everything. But I think, just be mindful about how you implement these technologies. And I know there's like budget constraints and there's gonna be security restraints, but like I don't know, slow roll this stuff in a way that actually, provides value and keeps everybody on point.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our panel. ASG has another session following this that focuses more on creative, so please encourage everybody to stick around, and thank you all.